The suspect, who is believed to be Charlie Kirk's killer, has been named as Tyler Robinson. Now, this is the latest information we have on the subject. The parents of Charlie Kirk's suspected assassin, Tyler Robinson, are a law enforcement veteran and a care worker. Law enforcement sources identified Robinson, a 22-year-old Utah resident, as the main suspect in the assassination of the conservative activist. Robinson was taken into custody on Thursday night in southern Utah after having allegedly confessed to his father, Matt. The father then contacted authorities and secured his son before he could be taken into custody. He also posed with guns in his childhood, which included an M2 Browning and .50 caliber gun. Now, as you can see on screen, this is his mugshot. It's been released. There's been other images, floating around online. Now, irresponsibly, the Wall Street Journal claims that bullets were found with transgender and anti-fascist scripture. Breaking: ammunition engraved with transgender and anti-fascist ideology was found inside the rifle authorities believe was used in Kirk's shooting, sources say. Now, these claims have been found to not be true, right? There's nothing about transgenderism on there. Now, this is Nancy Mace accusing the shooter of being trans.
This shit ends. Like, enough is enough. And now I have to deal with real safety concerns. It sounds like the shooter was a tranny or pro-tranny. And just because I want to protect women, that I'm worried about getting murdered? Are you fucking kidding me? It's out of control, and enough is enough. And I'm going to double down on this. I'm going to be more vigilant than ever. I'm going to be louder than I've ever been until this shit stops. It's got to stop.
So falsely accuses them of being trans and then throwing in the slur while you're at it. Now that we know the shooter is a white male, will Mace reflect on her comments? Of course not. Now, the press conference by the FBI claims that there were scripture on the bullets, and it had writing that said, "Hey, fascist catch," and "If you read this, you're gay, LMAO."
The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow, and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO.
I don't know how many leftists would use that language, if I'm honest. But of course, you heard there, the FBI didn't mention anything about transgenderism. Now, what everyone wants to know, let's be honest, is the political leanings of this person so they can play the blame game. Well, he comes from a conservative family and he himself is unaffiliated. Tyler Robinson is a registered non-partisan. His parents are both registered Republicans, and they shared a graphic saying Kirk shooting suspect has registered as non-partisan. Voter records show the suspect in the assassination of conservative activist and influencer Charlie Kirk has in the past registered as a non-partisan voter in Utah. Public records show Tyler Robinson, 22, has 2 parents registered as Republicans. Roughly half of Utah voters are Republicans, while about a quarter are unaffiliated voters. But to me, this is besides the point. What matters is gun control, right? Which has been missing from the debate. It doesn't matter the ideology of the person. What matters is how easily deranged people can get hold of guns. Now, earlier on today, I spoke to the Majority Report's Matt Binder to talk about the latest developments. So there were a couple of false flags. Initially, an older man was arrested on the same day. That turned out to be wrong. Then we had Kash Patel claim that they had the suspect in custody. Then that was rolled back. We had the Wall Street Journal claim there were bullets with transgender and anti-fascist scripture, and turned out that that was unsubstantiated. What is going on? Can you make sense of this for us?
So Charlie Kirk is shot at this event in Utah, and immediately the online speculation starts going around. There, like you said, there was an older man, maybe in his like 60s or 70s, who was arrested at first. There was video of him being arrested. Apparently, this guy is They were local Utah reporters in Utah were calling him like, "Oh, he's like a political gadfly. He's just like a normal attendee that we always see." But he was causing a disruption. The police knew who he was. Or they thought he was causing a disruption. It's unclear why they arrested him at first, but the police knew who he was. They took him in and then immediately released him. But of course, that spread right away until to this day, to this moment, you'll still see people sharing that image, speculating what he has to do with it. Was he in on it? Is he like the second man or the third man involved? And then there was another individual who was arrested. It's unclear exactly what happened there, but he was also immediately released. And then just this morning, day 3 of this manhunt for Charlie Kirk shooter, they apparently get the guy, the alleged shooter. It seems like this is him. Apparently, his name's Tyler Robinson. Apparently, he a roommate and his father saw the photos that the FBI had shared because Trump's FBI, run by Kash Patel, completely dropped the ball and had nothing. They were they were releasing everything that they had, which wasn't much, in hopes that someone out there would see the image and recognize the guy. Trump's FBI, I should say, gutted their special agents, fired a few of them, including the head special agent in Utah a couple of weeks ago. I believe the reason that they fired her was because it was a woman of color, and they fired her because they're against DEI and they assumed if a woman of color is running something in the FBI, of course, she can't, actually have the skills required for the job. She was hired based on who she is. She got fired. Imagine maybe this would have been much quicker, closed up much quicker if the FBI wasn't gutted out and there were people in Utah who knew what they were doing. So the father and a roommate apparently saw the shooter, recognized him. The father apparently went up to the son when he came home and said, confronted him about it. He admitted to his dad that he was the shooter. They contacted their youth minister, who apparently has connections with law enforcement. And when he went to go meet with the youth minister, police showed up and picked him up. And that's how they got this guy.
I mean, minutes after Kirk was shot, right, we had Republicans, the media, they attacked the left wing. Nancy Mace claimed it was a lefty and then said the person was trans. Look, we still don't really know the motivations, but I've seen reports that he was unaffiliated, came from a conservative family. I want to ask you, though, if the shooter, and this is if we ever find out, the shooter turns out they have left-wing positions, what do you think the fallout is going to be? And if it's just another case of a right-winger, what do you think is going to happen there?
I want to say, first of all, we don't know. Like we could talk about this in terms of like, what the discourse or, how the country should react or whatever. But the truth is we don't know at this point. Maybe by the time this gets released, we do know. But as of Friday, September 12th, it's a little bit after noon right here in the United States, Eastern time in New York. We don't know. All we know is exactly what I told you, and that there were writings, inscriptions on the shell casings. And from those inscriptions on the shell casings, this guy fits the profile of a lot of these recent school shooters in the United States, where they are extremely terminally online. They are part of these nihilist online groups. Some of them, there was a shooting in a school shooting in Denver, Colorado, the same day Charlie Kirk was shot. That, of course, has barely been a blip in the media because of the Charlie Kirk shooting. But I've been looking into that one. Reporters in Colorado have been looking into that one. And the 16-year-old shooter in that case was part of one of these groups that shared neo-Nazi imagery and lionized and looked up to previous school shooters. This has been like an overarching sort of thing here in the United States with these mass shooters. The mental health issue is the case across the board. To be able, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking about, people with mental illness, because there are plenty of people with mental illness who are completely normal, safe, nothing to worry about, that don't commit these acts of violence. But when you have these issues and you don't have treatment, you don't have health care to deal with them, they're not you don't have access to health care to deal with them, then that's when you spiral out of control, and the access to the guns and the being with other dark nihilist people online in these small communities who look up to violence, that all combines to create these sort of scenarios. The mental health crisis in this country, where we do not have adequate health care because it's not provided here. It's just, if you don't have the ability to access it because you don't have the funds, or you don't have enough money to get quality health care with the health care plan that you are able to afford, or if you can't even afford the medication, you are flat out of luck. There are a lot of shootings in this country that don't happen because of political ideology. Even a lot of political violence in this country is done by people who have no coherent political ideology. I mean, the right wing in the United States love to ignore this, but the guy who shot Donald Trump and grazed his ear because Trump moved at the exact time the guy took the shot. The guy who tried to assassinate Donald Trump had a history of right-wing politics. The people in his life even said, "We don't understand why he did this. He was a conservative. He had right-wing, conservative, libertarian politics as far as we knew for his whole life." To get to your question about, what if this is someone with, left-wing ideology? I want to know what it was that radicalized him into doing this, if it was left-wing ideology, because I don't know. Of anyone who espouses sort of violent rhetoric. Like, who are we talking about here? The Democrats? Like Chuck Schumer's out there? No, who's being radicalized by Chuck Schumer? Who's being radicalized even by like the left plank of the Democratic Party? AOC? Who's being radicalized by AOC to commit violence? On the right wing, however, you have a completely different ideological bent that espouses things that does radicalize people in that way. Like, that would be my argument. Like, if this guy does have left-wing politics, and it could be the case, what was it that was said that made him say, "Oh, I have to take action"? Because it would be unclear to me. And I would love to learn, because if that's the case, we don't know if this person's a right-winger or a left-winger, but we do know he had access to guns. In fact, the photos that have been pulled from his family's Facebook profiles show that this was a conservative gun. Again, we don't know about him specifically. Again, kids grow up and have different politics than their parents, but he comes from a conservative, very religious, gun-owning household, and there are photos of him at the gun range, tons of photos of him and his family members, including his younger siblings, at the gun range holding large weaponry, not little, handguns. Or you want to, I'm not a fan of guns personally, of any size or whatever. But every now and then you'll see a photo of a family taking a kid with a little handgun or whatever, and suit yourself. No, we got photos of this guy holding huge weaponry, large guns that you would only find in a war zone, at the gun range. And he's in the photo, and the parent who's captioning the photo is saying, "Oh, here's my son, age 11. Here's my son, age 12." That young, learning how to use firearms to that capacity. I mean, I clearly it played into his ability to kill Charlie Kirk from 150 yards away by shooting him in the neck with a scoped rifle.
I'm glad you spoke about mental health, actually, because that's something that has not been spoken about in the US, in the UK, right? It has genuinely just been, oh, well, what's the motive of the victim? Is it left wing? Is it right wing? And they're missing the point. I'm glad you spoke about mental health. Another thing, which I feel like when there's a school shooting, mass shooting, there was always a debate between, you'd had the Republican side would say thoughts and prayers, the Democrats would say we need gun control. Even that feels like it's missing. So do you think that the conversation and debate has moved away from regulation and it's become more partisan? Because it literally, before Kirk died, I mean, it was minutes after he was shot, they were speculating the political leanings of this person. Yet, usually, from where I sit, anyway, from the UK, there's always a big discussion about gun control. The fact that it's not there, Do you think now this means we're further away from gun control because it seems like it's not even making its way into the debate? And do you think, people become too ideological when it comes to guns? And do you think the NRA is also too powerful now?
I mean, I don't think the NRA actually is as powerful now as it was. I think the NRA isn't even needed anymore. The gun control debate is, by and large, in this country, dead. To be quite frank, if seeing kindergartners and first graders completely mauled with firearms in the various school shootings we've seen. Sandy Hook comes to mind right away in terms where the parents couldn't even identify their kids the way they were gunned down. And we're talking about 5, 6, 7-year-olds here. If that didn't push this country to do something, then what does? What does? I mean, Charlie Kirk himself is on the record. There's video of Charlie Kirk having a discussion at one of his events where he says he is okay with people dying every year from gun violence if it means upholding the Second Amendment, because that's just the cost of doing business. That's just if that's just a trade-off, then he's good with that. Me personally, I'm not good with that. I'm not happy that anyone dies in this way. I don't care what your politics are. I don't think people should be gunned down. I think it's horrific. But the people on the right are the ones who don't agree with that sentiment, and they're fine with that. They're so upset with Charlie Kirk's killing, and rightfully so. But would they even are they even considering that Charlie Kirk is now one of those statistics that they are fine with because his death is just the cost of doing business here? It's just the cost of keeping their Second Amendment. No one's calling in this country at any with anyone with any sort of power or influence. No one's calling for the complete abolishment of guns, of gun ownership. Just calling for more stringent measures when it comes to mental health. I mean, you're right. It's shocking how little it's discussed because there's no political points there. That's why, right? I mean, if the issue is mental illness that goes unchecked, that goes untreated, you can't use that politically. I mean, especially if you're on the right, because you don't believe in providing health care. Like, we could even talk about, there was this story that just came out about that there's this U.S. citizen from Chicago who went and joined the IDF, and there's a report now about that they were recorded in an interview that they didn't know what the interview was going to be for, bragging about how they mowed down an entire Palestinian family, one by one, knowing they were unarmed civilians just because they could, and they were proud of it. Like, yeah, he's talking and he's saying horrible things, and he's obviously a terrible person to be able to do these things. But also, there's something wrong with him to be able to say that and do that and be happy with it. Like, you just don't do that if there's not something wrong with you, no matter what your politics are, honestly.
I think that's a really good point you made there about mental health, though, that it's not something that can be politicized, not really, so they're not used. Again, also think it's very salient to bring up about Israel-Palestine, because a lot of people are so upset about one death, but seemingly ignore that. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on Turn Left again. Appreciate you giving your perspective from the US. Obviously, this is a developing story, so there's going to be more to come. But thank you again for coming on the show.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. I'll be happy to come on anytime.
So that was US commentator and contributor to the Majority Report. Great show, by the way, Matt Binder. Sarah, so from the minute we heard about Charlie Kirk, we had the US, UK politicians and pundits cry about left-wing violence and people assuming the shooter was left. Well, latest information we have is that Tyler wasn't politically affiliated to anyone, but he came from a conservative family. Do you think we're going to see mass apologies for trying to pin this on the left?
No. When do they ever apologize? When do they ever? They don't. I don't think they know how to spell sorry. And the reason for that is because it's structural. It's not just cynical. Like what you've what we've seen unfold is essentially like a 3-step playbook at work. Like step one, you've got to pre-assign motive before facts exist, and that primes the audience. It kind of riles them up and gives politicians a talking point. And then the next step would be to attach, a stigmatized identity to the assailant. So, like in this case, trans people, and use that slur against them so that we can make them even more scared of trans people because they never believe that trans people are human anyway. Because they think it converts a crime into some sort of culture war weapon. And then the final step would be when facts contradict the script, the inscriptions weren't trans ideology and the suspect's a non-affiliated white guy from a conservative household. You don't retract, you just pivot to, well, he was a lone wolf, and you keep the moral panic rolling. So that machinery just runs on like an asymmetric incentive. Like outrage travels faster than correction. So platforms will reward that anger, that and not necessarily like the accuracy of it. And politicians profit off of that shit. They profit from epistemic closure, telling their base that they were right to fear the left regardless of evidence. And an apology would automatically admit that the entire 48-hour news cycle was a manufactured narrative, not reporting. And then that will again solidify the fact that, well, you can't trust the media. So they won't do that because the narrative already did its work. It's already done its smear campaign. It othered a minority, smeared the left as inherently violent, and provided pretext for more repression and fundraising emails, essentially. And there's also like a double standard in attribution. When violence comes from someone coded right, the rhetorical move is just, atomization, lone wolf, mental health, this tragic like aberration. But when the suspects can be like known as a lefty, the move is always collectivization and indictment on all left of all left politics, like not just a little bit of it, like the whole thing. All trans people, all protest, you're all Antifa, this, that, and the other, and you're not condemning murder. Like that's not real analysis. That's not real nuance that they always call for. It's just like, oh, let's just apply collective guilt when it's useful and like radical individualism when it's not. And we should name the cost, because every time a paper runs a really, really enticing but unverified claim, it just narrows the space for truth and widens the target on vulnerable groups. And it also, just quickly, sorry, I know I'm rambling,
No, please.
but it dodges the policy question that actually reduces violence in the first place, which is what you said, gun access. Because ideology is an easier fight than the gun lobby. So no, there won't be any mass apologies because the incentives are to bank the smear, memory hold that correction, and move on to the next outrage. And I think our job is to refuse that cycle and separate motive from myth and refuse collective blame without evidence.
That analysis was absolutely spot on, by the way. I mean,
I've had time off. I've had time off.
It's so true that when it comes to the left, it's collective, right? It's a collective narrative. When it comes to the right, it's individual. And a good example of this is already today. We've seen Nancy Mace, who has been disgusting. Obviously, I've shown that clip of her using that slur against trans people. She has toned down her rhetoric. Other people have now, what they've done, because they've realised, oh, it's a young white man from a conservative family, not a radical leftist. They've suddenly changed their tone, and now they're asking the question, so what does a nice young boy, what happens? Who radicalised him? And there's suddenly questions about radicalisation and society, but it's not about ideology against the left. So when they thought they were left-wing, it was like, oh, left-wing people are just really, really bad. And now it's like, oh, it's a nice white boy from a conservative family. It's like, oh, what happened? How did this person get radicalized? They individualize it, don't they? They make it personal, but they almost, I'm not excusing it, but it's the same thing when it's like a white guy kills his family. It's a picture of him and his family on a speedboat. Whereas a black person, they get the horriblest photo of them, don't they?
They bring their mugshot to you, and it will be a mugshot that probably was taken before they said 3, 2, 1, here you go. Like it's one that was taken midway where they were probably like biting their lip or something. And the thing is though, I really, really feel like we need to drag the conversation back to material drivers. They
100%.
refuse to do that. Like who has the power? Who profits from this? And which policies keep enabling this violence? So that they did their tactic, the smear did its job, and the correction will only ever just be a footnote. But I'm not going to be waiting for apologies from them. I'm not even going to wait for them to hold themselves accountable because they never will.
Now, there is more. We've had many people claim that Charlie Kirk wasn't radical. He was a moderate, which is an insane claim. But people are going to say anyway, and this is Sophie Corcoran saying that on Twitter. Today, the BBC have come out and said that Charlie Kirk has extreme views. Kirk was a moderate conservative that debated college kids. Labeling him as an extremist is what got him killed. That's a wild claim. The BBC should be ashamed of themselves and stop using those kind of smears. Cancel culture, is it? I mean, we're allowed to be honest about our positions and what our view is, you know? I mean, people... he got killed for it. I mean, should we lie about his positions? But let's see if he's a moderate, shall we? This is Charlie Kirk essentially calling for the lynching of trans people.
I mean, these people are sick, and I don't say that lightly. The NCAA is a perverted organization. They platformed a biological male who won a national championship and then was allowed in incredibly disturbing detail to be around you and your fellow competitors. And again, I blame the decline of American men. This never should have been, someone should have just took care of it the way we used to take care of things in the 1950s or 60s. But, as you have testosterone rates go down and men start acting like women and they don't do anything, then, hey, who's to say? You're going to look, there are a lot of sick people in the world, unfortunately, and without the strength to go against them, the country is going to completely...
You hear that? We should do something about them. Now, here he is saying that black people had it better under slavery and the Jim Crow era.
It shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad, it was evil, but what happened? Something changed. They committed less crimes.
Maybe they were afraid. I mean, 4,000 black men, women, and children were killed in violent lynch mobs.
That's your explanation, but I guess...
Racial terror permeated American culture for hundreds of years.
Black America is worse than it has been
that affected
in the last 80 years.
The generational psyche of an entire group of people?
No, I'm sure it did. I'm not discounting that. I'm just...
If that's not enough for you, Charlie Kirk said that if his 10-year-old daughter was raped, the baby would be delivered.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got raped, and she was going to give birth and she would, and she was going to give birth and she was going to live, would you want her to go through that and carry her baby?
That's awfully graphic.
But it's a real life scenario that happens to many people.
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
Oh, okay, great. So that's insane.
But let me tell you why. No, hold on. Let me ask you a question.
But there's more. He also said that abortion worse than the Holocaust. Charlie Kirk's controversial views resurface after Trump ally assassinated. He said abortion is worse than the Holocaust. Okay, this man was not a moderate. Sarah, what are your thoughts about trying to make Charlie Kirk sound reasonable? I mean, do you think they're using the death of him to push the Overton window even further to the right to make it like Charlie Kirk, who, by the way, I would describe him as a fascist? I'm just calling it as I see it, right? Free speech, right? And they're trying to make him out as moderate.
They're fucking delusional. I'm sorry. This guy was not a moderate at all. I would call him a fash. He is a fascist. And he is just so... I never liked him. I've watched those Jubilee clips. I watched Jubilee when it came out and he was on there. And I was like, you got absolutely cooked, mate. Like, they absolutely ruined you on there. But this is true. The Overton, you're right. This is exactly what's going to happen. It's how the Overton window gets dragged rightward anyway. Like, the technique would be, you create this halo of martyrdom. He's a martyr, insist that the criticism of Kirk was incitement. So any accurate labeling of him or his politics becomes taboo. And then you would practice that euphemism management, rebrand explicitly extreme positions on trans people, on abortion, on race, on black people particularly, as just tough conversations or faith-based convictions, and this is just simply free speech. And then you would demand this false symmetry from the media. If he's called extreme, then someone must call him moderate to balance that segment. But the end state is that language collapses and then extremist loses meaning and policies once unthinkable are recast as mainstream. But why does that matter? Simply because redefining the center, defining the center becomes impossible. Defining the center becomes possible. If Kirk, who argued that a child rape victim, his daughter, should be forced to give birth, compared abortion to the Holocaust and dehumanized trans people is successfully relabeled as moderate, then any policy adhered to the right of him becomes reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
And that's fucked. That's normalization of like proximity. It's awful. And it has like concrete effects because it shifts newsroom framing. It chills us as like analysts and charities who try to support people who are actually going through a really, really fucking awful time. And it emboldens these legislators more so to push harsher bills under the cover of mainstream conservatism or being moderate. And I also am sick and tired of what I'm seeing online about Kirk. I'm sorry. Like, yes, he's died. I will say, I am consistent when it comes to calling out political violence, but I find that the right are so ignorant to political violence. They are so selective with their outrage. And this is what pisses me off about them, because I see political violence as, you know, as homelessness. I see it as the gun crimes that's happening. I see it as the kids that are starving in Gaza. I see it as everything. I see it as also the migrants who are fleeing political violence in places in Gaza or Syria or wherever, coming to the UK as political violence. But these very same people who say, why don't you show some compassion? Why do you have no empathy, etc., etc., when you're the same person who says to us, shoot the boats, who the fuck are you? I'm sick and tired of this fake morality that they try to bestow. And I am going to call him an extremist. I do think he radicalized people, and I do think he contributed to violence. He was someone who was hand in hand with Trump, who I think is an absolute war crimes enthusiast. So I think we can unequivocally obviously condemn his murder, but still speak plainly about a body of rhetoric that was punitive and apocalyptic in nature and so dehumanizing and racist and ableist and so transphobic. I think, in fact, naming the extremism is what keeps the red lines. I think if we accept this rewrite, tomorrow's moderate will be further right again, and the cycle continues.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.